Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Spencer Rell, and today I want to talk about my term paper outline, discussing the mind versus body debate. This discussion will compare and contrast two differing worldviews for the mind versus body debate, that being Cartesian dualism and materialism. Opinions consulted for dualism will include René Descartes' arguments for dualism, including Princess Elizabeth's concerns to him included in her letters. Materialism will mostly feature David Armstrong's points and how he reached his argument using Gilbert Ryall's behaviorism ideas. Additionally, Leibniz's law, behaviorism, and scientism will be analyzed to compare the two worldviews. The thesis for this paper will be that materialism is the better, more accurate worldview. The main idea of dualism is that the mind and the body are completely separate entities. However, dualism does not deny that they closely relate to each other and communicate with each other. Dualists may believe that there are only two types of substances in the world, mind and matter, where matter is everything that isn't the mind, including the body. Descartes mostly uses a law of comparisons known as Leibniz's law to formulate his arguments. This law states that for two objects to be identical, they must share all properties. To use this to compare the mind and the body, his arguments for dualism all follow this same basic structure. Premise 1, a property of the mind. Premise 2, a property of the body not shared by the mind. Premise 3, using Leibniz's law to compare these properties. Conclusion, the mind and the body are not the same. Descartes and dualists alike do recognize the strong connection between the two, so the pineal gland comes into play here to explain the communication of the two. Dualists argue that brain states are what cause behavior. Some are convinced by this theory, though. Elizabeth voices her concerns to Descartes about how a non-physical being, the mind, can communicate and cause things to happen in a physical being, the body. These concerns, as well as Descartes' responses, will be discussed in the paper. The differing opinion, materialism, is spearheaded by Australian philosopher David Armstrong. Materialism is just the opposite of dualism. The mind and the body are one entity. Armstrong uses the notion that the mind is no more than a physiochemical reaction. His claim about why science should be the definitive opinion in controversial matters will also be addressed. To materialists, the mind and the brain are the exact same thing. The two words mean the same idea. It is clear here that Armstrong was strongly influenced by Gilbert Ryall's behaviorism, which will be discussed. Behaviorism is seen as an early version of materialism, according to Armstrong. Behaviorism relies on observing behavior exhibited by a person that relates to their internal emotions. Obviously, this begs the question of, what about emotions that a person doesn't exhibit? The issues with this behaviorist view, known as the first-person problem, will be addressed, using the autopilot example. Now, moving on to comparing the two ideas, the main difference here is that with dualism, brain states are what cause behavior. With materialism, brain states are that behavior, thus leading to the conclusion that the mind and the brain are the same thing. To reiterate, however, I think the most important thing here to keep in mind is the true nature of this debate, where dualists think that the mind and the body are completely separate. The mind is something that affects the way the body behaves. Materialists believe that the mind and the brain, being part of the body, are exactly the same thing. When something happens to the body, the mind is just a performance of the brain that it just happens to do. There is no separation here. The mind is the brain. To decide which theory is better, Descartes' misuse of Leibniz's law obviously will have to come into inspection. Additionally, his response, or lack thereof, to Elizabeth's letters will be addressed. For materialism, scientism as the end-all, be-all solution to controversial debates will be scrutinized. How Armstrong defends the first-person behaviorism issue will come into debate. Lastly, the two YouTube clips from the lecture will be used. and each side's responses will be offered up, and ultimately explaining why materialism is the more likely and overall better solution to the mind versus body debate. So that's pretty much the outline for my term paper. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to your feedback.